Welcome to this RIM month webinar. Help us help you. I'm going to try and start with a video clip. It's very short. If it doesn't work, it's not a deal breaker. I just thought it would be fun for those who don't know this movie. So see if it will work.
Help me. Help me, God. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help you.
So I cut it off before we got to the good part of Cuba Gooding Jr., but just wanted to start with that. That's how I think we feel at the State Archives. You guys have a real job, and we really want to help. So the point of this webinar is to kind of just talk about the services that we offer so that you guys are aware of them, and a little bit about some of the things that can help you use the services more efficiently. So some of the difficult situations that you guys deal with are overfull storage spaces, whether electronic, which is the image at the bottom, our network drives, looks like that a couple years ago, or email, which is represented by hard copy of letters, but really who has in baskets anymore, right? And just rooms full of records. Audits, litigation, grammar requests and appeals, moving buildings or moving offices, condensing, consolidating office space, being a new records officer, feeling overwhelmed, having old records that are falling apart, and finding legacy formats that you have no way to read. And then, of course, there's disasters that can be both natural or man-made. So those are just some of the challenges that we know you face. One of the services that can help with those challenges is Records and Information Management Consultation. We abbreviate that as RIM, so I will be using that abbreviation throughout this training. So RIM consultation could be useful for records officers, chief administrative officers, records support staff, database administrators who have questions or need help. It's provided by RIM specialists, the chief records officer, that's me, our government records ombudsman, which is Rosemary Cundiff. It's free, and if you need it, all you need to do is contact one of us with questions. So if you work for one of these agencies, any special district, education agency, UDAF, DABC, cultural and community engagements, which used to be called Heritage Arts, and DNR, any of those entities, you would work with Avalon Snell, and there's her contact information. If you work for a county or a municipality, a law enforcement agency, including Highway Patrol, District Courts, Administrative Office of the Courts, you would work with Heidi Steed, and there's her contact information. If you work for Pardons and Parole, Corrections, Commerce, Financial Institutions, Insurance, Labor Commission, Public Service Commission, or Tax Commission, there's your analyst or your RIM specialist would be Matt Pierce. And then if you work for any elected state office, for DEQ, GovOps, Health, Human Services, the National Guard, DPS, except Highway Patrol, CITLA, UDOT, the VA, or Workforce Services, then Renee Wilson is your RIM specialist, and there's her contact information. If you need help with grammar requests and appeals or mediation, here's Rosemary Cundiff's contact information. And if you can't get hold of your RIM specialist, or if you have a question about grammar or records management, there is my contact information. So I'm going to refer to the RIM specialist quite a bit throughout this, and just so you know, that's who you would contact depending on your agency. So one of the services we offer is records appraisal and assessment. So What this looks like is that you would contact your RIM specialist, and the RIM specialist would coordinate with the applicable team here at the archives. We have a local government team and a state government team, and each team has at least one RIM specialist and at least one archivist. So the RIM specialist would facilitate a visit or a discussion about the records with you and the team, and would follow up with you to assist with any questions or planning or action items that come out of that meeting. For electronic records, it would work in a similar way, but the RIM specialist would most likely loop in our electronic archivist, Elizabeth Perks. And then retention schedules, in a way, is a service that we offer. We are mandated to have a model retention schedule available for you. Retention schedules authorize destruction or transfer of records, and in that way, they really are a valuable service because they can help you tackle a room that looks like this. So they're provided by us, and Matt Pierce is the RIM specialist who handles updates to general retention schedules. So the way to apply it, I'm just going to give you an example. Record here. So this is an HR record. It's something that we create when we are interviewing job applicants. They authorize us to contact their job references, and we have all applicants fill one of these out, whether they're hired or not. So if this is what I was looking at, the way I would use a general schedule, once I understand what the record is, then I'm going to search the general retention schedules, and I used employee hiring as my search term, and the second hit on my list, staff acquisition records, looked promising. And on closer inspection, it is describing my record very well, that it's used to recruit and hire and includes candidates not hired. And it gives me some instructions about retention and disposition. So I am able to determine what to do next and do it at the right time. 2 years after that hiring closes, I can shred that document. And when I do so, I document that I did it. And I document the authorization, the retention schedule I used. This is my actual destruction log. This is not a sample destruction log. Except I added that item as a sample. I'll remove it, don't worry. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And there's Matt Pierce's contact information. So the other type is series-specific retention schedules. And these ones are similar in the way that you can implement them, but getting them in place is a little different. You work with the RIM specialist here at the State Archives to get them approved through the Records Management Committee. You find them a little differently on that page. You'd put in your agency, and you'd look at the retention and classification report, and then you get this list of links on the left there, and choose one that you can look at, and it has similar information, and I use the exact same destruction log. So the Records Management Committee is authorized by the state to approve or reject proposed retention schedules for all governmental entities. And so you would work with your RIM specialist to draft and submit a retention schedule to them for approval. There is a caveat in the law that political subdivisions, also known to humans as local governmental entities, they can actually create their own retention schedules, and they would just have it approved by their local governing board, just like any other ordinance or policy. And they also must file their retention schedules and other RIM policies and ordinances with the State Archives. So just email a PDF copy to your RIM specialist and to me. And that's how that works if you choose to do that. So really, retention schedules are a benefit to you because they offer some safe harbor in time of audit or litigation, save you a lot of time finding things, and can help when you're moving offices or buildings, and certainly reduce storage needs by reducing what you're storing. Another service that we offer is record preservation, which maybe is assumed since we're an archive, but I thought it would be worth mentioning that, again, you would work with your RIM specialist who would work with the local or state government team on our staff. So one way that you can transfer historical paper records to us is by filling out an online transfer form. And then when you get the confirmation email, arranging delivery and delivering boxes to us. And that's that whole process. It's pretty straightforward. Another way that it sometimes works is that we will go to an agency and load up their historical records and bring it all back to the state archives where we organize and store it, which can create kind of a large project for us, but there's a benefit to it in that we kind of take care of the collection all at once. These photos are from a trip to the Department of Corrections Draper Prison in December. As you know, they're going to be moving the prison. They've started moving the prison, but they're going to move all of the inmates in June. And so they are getting pretty serious about cleaning out their records. So we were very excited to get a really wonderful collection of historical records from them. So either way that the transfer happens, documentation must be created and the transfer must be approved by the state archives so that everybody's on the same page and we know that all our ducks are in a row. So some common questions that we get about our repository here is if questions about whether or not it's climate controlled, which it is, 60% or 60 degrees and 40% humidity at all times. And on really hot days in the summer, we may or may not go on the mezzanine to cool off. It's a lovely, lovely room, that repository. It is also very secure. Most people on staff don't have access to it, let alone people not on staff. But we do provide tours, which is what's happening actually in this photo. Ken gives great tours, and Lauren. So other questions that we get is how should we ship fragile old records? Well, preferably in a box, but if not, then contact us and we will help you get them here. And as far as restoring falling apart records, it is best if you work with us first. Sometimes we will actually refer you to like a vendor, a conservation expert to help you with that. We do recommend that you don't use Elmer's glue to glue the binding back on the book. We've seen some very creative do-it-yourself repairs. But basically reach out to us and let's talk about it together and figure out how we can best restore your records. So as far as electronic records go, it's much trickier, as you can imagine. So some guidance is to identify the kinds of records that you're going to transfer and document the file structure, the formats, like media formats, and the volume of the record you're going to transfer, and then consult with us about what would be the best way to transfer those particular records. We've really so far been handling these on a case-by-case basis. That's what it really comes down to. We would love an easy answer that's as easy as like clicking a few buttons, uploading a file and sending it our way, but at this point that's not feasible. So another way that it can sometimes work is usually if it's part of like a case file that contains both paper and electronic files, we'll see records officers toss thumb drives and CDs or DVDs, hard drives into boxes along with paper records and send those often to the record center, sometimes to us. So we do have on the form a way that you can tell us that that's what you're doing. If it's including non-paper records, just check that box. so that we at least have some documentation that that's the case, but it may be many, many years before that box is opened up. So it's very unlikely that those files are going to be recoverable by the time we get the records. Just FYI, it's not a recommended method for that reason. We actually will often get the electronic records from you before we are supposed to be taking on full custody of the records. And that's just so that we can have a preservation copy. It's just so much harder to get the records later when it comes to electronic records. So an example is executive email. If you have an executive resign or leave, we like to harvest their email right away and their electronic files. And we don't provide access to them. We follow the retention schedule still as far as custody goes for access purposes, but for preservation purposes, we like to take a copy in just so that we can make sure we can maintain that thing and be able to open it later. So that's kind of the way it's been working for electronic records. Some common questions we get is what has to go to the state archives, and can we just keep our historical records in our offices forever? Well, yes, you can. The law just requires that you keep them in a way that they can be used and readable, human readable, and for the full length of their retention and disposition. So if it's permanent, that's a lot to ask of an agency that's not specifically set up to preserve records. So we do recommend you send them to us, but you can keep them in your office if you can keep them to that standard. So another service we offer is reformatting, and it's useful for employees who need preservation copies of current records or access copies of microfilmed records that they no longer have a reader for, which happens a lot, as you can imagine. It's not a free service. This one costs about $40 a reel. If you have questions or interest in this, you would be best served by contacting Melissa Coy. She is our new reformatting program manager, and she's fantastic. So there's her contact information, and she would love to consult with you about your records. And this, again, is kind of a case-by-case basis to figure out the best plan for reformatting. So another service is records access via our research center. And this is a photo of our research center located in the Rio Grande building, but it's several years old. This service is something that any employee of a governmental entity who needs a copy of their historical records or another agency's historical records would use. So once they're transferred to us, this is how you would access those historical records. But this research center can no longer be used because of the earthquake, which happened just over 2 years ago, if you can believe it, and damaged not just the plaster, but the actual foundation and structure of the Rio Grande building. So it also exposed lead paint and asbestos into the air, and so that made it uninhabitable for a time. Now we don't go in there just because it's not safe building structure-wise. We've been moving our collections out and have set up a temporary for long-term temporary research center in our courtyard, which is the room we used to use for trainings. So this is Heidi Stringham teaching some BYU students just last month who came to learn about archives, and then Tony Castro on the right, smiling. He's often doing that. He's a very, very friendly, kind person. So if you need access to a historical record, Heidi Stringham is the research center manager, and you can contact her at that number and email. Some common questions we get is how can I get my agency's records that have been transferred there? And I just answered that through this research center. How can you find out what your agency has at the archives? Contact Heidi, and she will look up what we have from your agency. And how can you expunge records that are at the archives? There's a couple different ways. The expungement order can be passed along to Heidi, or you can set up a time to come in and work with her to expunge the records. We've had agencies prefer to do that so that they can follow the policy or the procedure that they've always used to expunge their records. And can you send a patron, a requester, to the archives for record? And yes, that is one of the great benefits of having your records at the archives, is that when you get a request, you can send them to us. This picture shows the Rio Grande building on the right, where the research center used to be, and the State Archives building straight ahead. And my office is that top left window. You can barely see it there. And this is a view of it from behind. I just wanted to point out that they are two different buildings. There's a glass breezeway that connects them. And the State Archives actually was not damaged by the earthquake, but the Rio Grande was. So it's just our research center that's been affected. And this is the ASRS automatic storage retrieval system, which I could show you that video, but I won't. I will move on. Okay, so another service that we provide is offsite record storage. So speaking of different buildings, this is a completely separate building up in Utah. It's the State Record Center. It's housed in a warehouse, or located in a warehouse district that was built in World War II to house naval, large naval ship parts that the Air Force could fly to the coast, and it was thought to be safer to keep them inland. So that's what this district was built for. It's a very interesting place. And this was renovated and opened in 2012, and it's a beautiful record center. We really love it. And that's the address, the mailing address and the physical address of it. As you can see, it is not open to the public. Not only does it look different on the outside from the archives, but it's also different on the inside. It's larger, there are more records, it's not completely climate controlled. They do have cold storage there for microfilm and slides, that kind of thing, but the large warehouse area is not climate controlled. And it doesn't have the fancy automatic storage retrieval system. Instead, we use wave machines, and that's actually Renee in the middle there on a forklift. She and I got to go certify to drive these really cool machines. That was a very fun day a few years ago. But we haven't used that skill very much because we don't really work up there, but it was good to learn how to do it. This is Chaz Leach on the right, one of the staff up there. And the main difference between this building and the State Archives is that the records that are at the State Record Center are owned by the agencies that send them still. It's offsite storage. It's not a transfer of custody, if that makes sense. So even though we have physical custody of the records there, we do not have the custody rights to provide access to those records or destroy those records. We have to have your authorization to destroy them, and you handle the access to them. So the really great thing about this service is that we manage the records through their life cycle. And that means that we've got to have a retention schedule for them, and we've got to have dates for the box contents. And with those two pieces of information, we are able to calculate the retention effectively. And both permanent and non-permanent records are welcome to be stored up there. If they are permanent records, when the retention ends, they are automatically transferred to the State Archives. If they are non-permanent records, when the retention ends, you get a notification about needing to authorize destruction if you're the records officer. We'll go into that a little bit more later. So we do provide tours there, and you can contact Lisa Catano or Lauren or a RIM specialist to request a tour. It's a very secure building, and that's barbed wire. Yes, that is barbed wire, and it's not open to the public. So if you want access, you'll need to book a tour or schedule a drop-off of records. So we protect your records there very, diligently by never providing them to the public and by only giving them to the records officer, the chief administrative officer, or someone in their agency who they tell us can receive it. So they are the ones that designate who can receive records, which slows down the process a little bit sometimes, but it's really important to us that those records are secure. So there is a very quick turnaround for recalled records. If you need a record that's stored there, you can request it, and it gets into the mail that day. The mail is picked up at 2 p.m. So if you've requested it by 1:30 p.m., it will go out in the mail that day. They are very, very responsive and quick on that. We also have a scan on demand option. If you, especially if you're further away from the facility, or if you just need it right away, they will pull it and get it sent to you via encrypted email within 24 hours. It doesn't need to be a scannable document, so it can't be a bound book or sealed court document or something like that. And we kind of cap that off at about 100 pages. So that's Melody Yearsley. She's the one that does those scan on demands. So it can be useful to anyone needing to repurpose the space and move to a building or digitize permanent records that haven't met retention. It's just a great storage place for inactive paper records. And it's free, except you do need to purchase the boxes and you need to arrange for transportation of the records, however you choose to do that. And those are the instructions on the website. It goes into a lot of detail. So we don't usually go into that much detail for how to use a service, but this one in particular is somewhat complicated, but mostly it's just that if you don't follow the instructions the way that they are written, it can cause some problems for you. So we try to give you as exact as information as we can. So you start off by making sure you have a record series number for the records. That is what links it to a retention schedule. And in format management, it should say that these are going to be transferred to the State Record Center. If it doesn't have that language in there, you need to contact your own specialist so they can add that language. It's not a big deal to do that. It's just that's kind of what sets it up to be received there, and they can't do it without that language in there. So just FYI on that. To purchase the boxes, the instructions on our website give you very precise, you have to do it in order. If you don't do it in order, then they can't find the item or they give you the wrong price for the item. So we've got very specific instructions there. They do have to be these boxes purchased from Office Depot. They're designed to handle the heavier loads and to withstand a lot of time. The banker boxes just fall apart when you try to lift them up. They will just break. So these ones were built to our specification. So and then packing and labeling boxes. Make sure one record series per box only. Do not overpack. You have to be able to fit your fingers in both handles, a couple inches. Don't put the folders in upside down. These are kind of tips based on things that people have done accidentally. So when they go to pull a file for someone, the records all come out. Don't put anything in there that will make it so the box can't fit easily. So those metal hanging folders, 3-ring binders, that kind of thing need to be replaced with labeled manila folders. And then make sure you label the box with a permanent marker directly on the cardboard of the box. Sometimes people want to put labels on there, but they will dry off and fall off. Dry up and fall off. So this is something that not everybody thinks to do, but it will really your agency, usually future people in your agency. But create a list of everything you put in the box of the file level inventory, and put a copy of it in the box, and then keep at least one copy in the office where anyone can find it. And that way, if they need something, they will be able to request it accurately and get the record that they need. Don't tape any paper transfer documentation or an inventory or anything like that on the out box. It'll get torn off as it gets moved on and off shelves. So the person submitting the form and sending the boxes doesn't have to be the records officer, but the form has a place for the records officer information, and that needs to be the records officer's information. And then the person submitting the form fills out those other fields there. And the date range of all of the boxes transferred goes in one part of the form, and then the date range of each box being transferred goes in another part of the form where you're listing item level box. Here's the box, here's a description, and the date range of the things in that box. So those are very different. One is used to document the transfer, and the other is used, goes along with the box in our database and provides some very vital information about it. So after you submit that, you will get a confirmation email. If there are any problems, you'll get an email saying that. If there are no problems, you'll get an email saying go ahead and schedule delivery or send those boxes. If you are sending a lot, well, more than 20 boxes, we ask that you actually schedule a day to deliver them and then stick to that day, just because they are able to kind of arrange their schedules around that to make sure they have people on hand at that time. It's best to use pallets to load boxes on if you have more than 32 boxes, and arrange them 8 per layer with labels showing. And you can deliver them in person or through mail, state mail or federal mail or any courier service. This is a flatbed truck that UDOT used a couple weeks ago. That's what they had available. It worked great. Make sure that you save the box accession report the Record Center will send you after they accession the boxes. What that does is show you their record box number for the box and your box number, and correlates those so that when you need to recall the records, you use the documentation created during the transfer to recall the records when you need them. So the record transfer form will tell you the series number and the agency box number, and the box inventory or container list will tell you the file name or number, and the box accession report will tell you the Record Center box number. So all of those things that you need on there are on the documentation that should be created at the time of transfer. And again, there's 2 separate parts here, one for requester, one for recipient. That's so that if you're not the records officer, but you are the one getting the record, you can put in your records officer's information, and then your information is the recipient, and you need to be someone that works in that agency. We don't just send that to random people. So if you are trying to figure out what boxes were previously sent to the Record Center, we can send you a box report or box accession report. They're very similar reports. Just contact your room specialist or a Record Center staff member, and we can do that for you. So if you need to find out what's inside the boxes previously sent to the Record Center, you're in a little bit more of a pickle, because that is not something that we document. That is completely the agency's responsibility to document. We don't even open the boxes unless you request a file from a box. So if you're trying to reconstruct that information, you can recall the entire box to your office and hope that it includes an inventory in it. If not, you can inventory it at that time. Or you can contact the Record Center staff, and they will look to see if there is an inventory inside the box, and send you a copy of it if there is. So they're very accommodating that way. And when it's time for the records to be transferred or destroyed, if it's destroyed, then you will get an email notifying you that you need to, that time has come up and that you need to act on it. So your choices will be approve the destruction, or I need to place a hold on this until a certain date, and here's why, or please send the box back to us and we're going to destroy it ourselves. So you just let them know and then sign it. If you ignore the first email notification, the next month you and your CAO will get one. And if you ignore it again, both of you, after 90 days, the records will be returned to your agency. And that's in our administrative rule. So that's kind of how that works. This is the cold storage room. There, some of the questions that we get are, how should we number our boxes? And that's really entirely up to you. It's whatever works for you, your agency box number. I will say that you should use something that's unique to that record series. So every box within a series has a unique box number. So I usually use the date, or at least the year in the box number somewhere. It can be alphanumerical if it's something like personnel records or case files. So it's good to look on those accession reports to see how your agency has been naming boxes and kind of follow the pattern if you can. But that is up to you. And if you don't want to return a file that you've recalled, you don't have to. It's your record, right? But it is good if you let them know that you're not going to be returning it, and then they can just document that. And if you want to have the authority to approve the destruction of boxes, you need to be a records officer or chief administrative officer. So either you can have the chief administrative officer make you a records officer, or you can just come up with an internal process that has you be part of the review and approval for that. And we don't even care if you sign the form in addition to the records officer. We just have to have the records officer or chief administrative officer sign it as well. And if you're located in Southern Utah, can you use it? Yes, you can. It might slow things down just a little bit if you're the mail, once the record's in the mail, it might take a little time. We don't charge you for sending records to you or anything, so it's not going to cost you any more, just a little bit more probably to transport them initially. And you'd be a good candidate for the Scan on Demand program. So if you have questions, this is the staff. Besides Melody Yearsley, there's Lisa Catano. She manages the Record Center. And then Jim Duke in the middle and Chaz Leach on the right. So another service that we offer is training and education, including certification, which is something that was mandated that we do in 2012, I believe. So training and education can be useful for any records support staff, chief administrative officers, records officers, new ones in particular, but really anyone in your agency, and can be provided by a lot of people on our staff depending on what the topic is. Of course, we don't charge anything for training. We train on a variety of topics, and we schedule some throughout the year, some in person and some virtual. We also are willing to schedule a training upon request, and we often are able to come to you or your region, to your entity or your region, and we provide training for anywhere from 1 person to 100 plus people. You don't have to have a minimum number of people. We have live and recorded videos, and we do post all of those on our website. They're not as centralized as I would like at this point, as easy to find, but they're there. And so if you need to help finding them, just let us know and we can help you get to that. We also create guidelines and templates, things like email management, social media, third-party vendor contracts, moving guides, all kinds of things. And you can find those on our website. There's also a lot of GRAMA guidelines, like how to classify drafts, and there's SRC case history, and there's just a lot of resources on our website. So if you need help finding anything, let us know. So certification is mandated. It's every year you need to take 1 test. We've created 2 tests. You can alternate every other year. Depends on your responsibilities, what you kind of going to do for that. But you only have to take 1 test each year. It has to be online. That's what's in the law. So it is. And It's free. So the study materials, as you can see on our website, they're the reference materials. You can, it's an open book test. You can open that up and then open the test and kind of navigate your way through. If you're a records officer, you can also get to it through the open records portal. If you're not a records officer, you can't. It looks slightly different at this point. So common questions: how do you receive continuing education credit for training? You would just let the trainer know that you want that, and we would create a certificate for you. We don't generally hand those out. We used to do that, but people got a little confused about whether that was certification or not. It is not certification, even if you have a certificate from the training, right? Certification is done through that online test only. So, but we can create those if you need one. And do we have a quick reference sheet for how long to keep records? Yeah, you could find, the moving guide has some, and then we also have some in the general schedule, retention schedule page. There are some topical ones there as well. Why do you have to take the test every year? Because the legislature says so. There are things that change about grandma and other records laws. So I think that's why they wanted it every year, to accommodate for that. And why is it so difficult? Well, records management's not an easy thing to do, and grammar for sure is not an easy thing to learn about. And it's meant to prepare you for being able to do those things in real life. So the tests are a little difficult. We try not to make them tricky. If there are things you hate about the test, we are always open to your feedback, and we do try and update those tests and make them helpful. We're working on an interactive scenario-based certification test. So hopefully we will have that completed this year, and things will be not quite so difficult going forward. One thing we also provide is a monthly newsletter that our outreach person, Lauren Katz, creates for us, and it's got some fun, like Dear Abby Q&A articles, just to give you answers to common questions we get, and spotlights on records officers and retention schedule updates, those kinds of things. So if you want to subscribe to that, let Lauren know. There's her email address. Another service we provide is mediation for records requests and appeals. This is Rosemary Cundiff. She is the Government Records Ombudsman, full-time. This job has grown every year. We get more and more appeals, just as all of you get more and more requests. So it continues to just grow and grow. So if you need help with a difficult request or a difficult requester, mediation can be, these are not paid actors, but this is a simulation because we do try and keep mediation a fairly confidential process. And so at any point in the request process, you can ask for mediation. It can happen before you've responded, after, while you're preparing for your appeal, after the appeal is scheduled, or even after it's heard. Mediation is a possibility still and can be helpful. And it can be in person or virtual meetings, but it also can just be phone calls and emails, just depending on the situation. And sometimes everybody gets together in one room, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they meet individually with Rosemary. So there's a lot of options. If you need help with something like that, just contact Rosemary. She does prefer phone calls, just FYI. Oh, and common questions. Does Rosemary have a sense of humor? Which is actually a question I've never been asked, but I love that she dressed up in 2012 for Halloween as the grandma that was used in the City Weekly grandma illustration. I just find it delightful, so I thought I'd give you that. And then what is the success rate of mediation? It's actually quite high. So for last year, 71% were resolved through mediation. 22% moved on to an SRC hearing, and 7% are still pending as of the end of 2021. Some of those were being mediated even after the SRC hearing. So it's not like moving on to an SRC hearing means it's failed completely. Mediation really can be very helpful throughout any part of the process. Guidance through appeals to the SRC, to the State Records Committee. Rebecca Shaw is now the secretary and can help you through that. Once you're in an SRC appeal process, you are referred to as the respondent, and the requester is now the petitioner. But it's not a court of law, just so you know, but don't treat it like a court of law. So you'll get, if they appeal within 30 days of the CAO's decision, if they appeal to the State Records Committee within 30 days, then Rebecca will schedule the appeal and let you know, you and your CAO know about the hearing. And you should get a copy of the appeal from the requesters, you know exactly what it is they're asking for. And then if there's an interested party, like a contracted vendor involved in the records dispute, you would want to notify them in case they need to prepare to be there as well. So as you prepare for the hearing, consider utilizing mediation, and you have to prepare a statement of facts about why the records access or fee waiver request was denied. And you've got to submit that to the SRC secretary at least 5 business days before the scheduled hearing. And you have to mail, like snail mail, via first-class mail to the petitioner a copy of that, which is kind of crazy because if you send that in the mail 5 business days before, they oftentimes don't get it. So I recommend emailing it as well, but the law is very specific about that requirement. It's kind of a little outdated. And then you also need to provide the disputed records Bates stamped to the SRC secretary before the hearing so she can make sure she can open them all. Because if the committee votes to go in camera to review them, she's got to have them ready for them right then. And so those are some tips about how that works. If you have questions, contact Rebecca. Like if you don't know what Bates stamped is, which I didn't when I went through this process, she explained it and I was able to do that pretty easily. So one common question she gets is, I thought this was resolved in mediation, can it be withdrawn? And the answer is yes, but the petitioner is the one that has to withdraw it officially. So if that happens to you, just contact Rebecca and she will contact the petitioner to find out what's going on and to get it withdrawn if that's the situation. So another service is records access and provision via the transparency portals. So the public notice website and the open records portal, there they are. We have the new designs coming in June of 2022. They are currently being redesigned by the same vendor that originally built the Utah Public Notice website. They are redesigning both of them for us, and it'll be pretty big changes with the open records portal. We'll have a more updated database behind that, which will really help in the speed and convenience there. So you guys probably all are familiar with the public notice website because you probably have to post things to it. There's instructions on the website there if you need help. It answers a lot of common questions. But Dylan Mace, who is the administrator of both of these portals, also emails instructions to someone when he sets them up as a new owner or poster on there. So some issues that come up that we get asked about. How do I upload video files? Well, you don't. There are some video or some file types that are just not supported, partially just because the file sizes are so huge. Anything over 200 megabytes cannot be uploaded. So you can make an audio file from a video file if you have, you'll need a software, some kind of software to convert that and save it as an MP3. And then if the file's too big, or if you can't convert the audio, the file type, you can post those maybe on your own website and then provide the link to that in the public notice website. That is an acceptable option, I am told by Dylan. So the other thing we like to point out is that posting records there is not the same as transferring records to the state archives. So you should still be maintaining these records in your agency and at some point transferring them to the state archives, not via the public notice website. And that's his contact information. And then the open records portal. A little different, this is where members of the public can post requests to any governmental entity. So some of the questions we get is, how do I update who gets the notifications and agency information, contact information? Well, if you're a records officer, you have this dashboard where you can go in and update your own information, including whether or not you want to get notifications. If you're a chief administrative officer, you have a different looking dashboard where you can go in and update agency assignments and contact information. It's not very easy to use, but it's there. But really the easiest option is just to contact a RIM specialist or Dylan Mace and let them know about the updates, and we can just make those updates. I also can make those updates if you contact me, but that's a viable option as well. Who owns these records and how long are they kept? This has come up recently. I got a record request from a frequent flyer. I wanted to know all of this information because he could no longer open some attachments on some requests that were answered a few months back. So I just wanted to go over quickly. The retention for record access requests and appeals is 2 years after final action and then destroy. Final action being like the last possible action for that, right? It's gone through the time frame for appeals and all of that is resolved, right? Then you start counting. So that's the retention schedule for these. But that does not address, this retention schedule does not apply to the attachments, because those attachments are copies of records that have their own retention schedules, right? So within the Open Records portal, we, the State Archives, owns the records. We own the requests, the responses, and the copies of attached records. You own and maintain the record copy of those attached records in your agency. So we delete the attachments in the Open Records portal after 60 days because they're just a copy of the record and they're not the record copy. We delete the record requests and responses after 3 years. So that is the answer to that question. I hope that answers the question. And then some other common questions. Where can I find an older request? There's this really strange feature. I'm sure it will go away in June, but if you want to see older requests, you have to click on advanced search and say no to the question only open requests and apply that filter. And then you will get to see open and closed requests, and all of your requests will show up. So again, there's Dylan Mason, his contact information. So finally, this is the last one I'll go over, is a service that we offer is disaster recovery. We don't actually offer the service, but we helped the state contract with a very well-known disaster recovery company called Belfour USA Group, and they're able to come from offsite out of the area wherever the disaster is. They've got multiple locations to come help. They help with fire, flood, mold, storms, lots of different kinds of disasters. And you just contact them, Paul Schachowski at Belfour, and that's his phone number and email address, and you give him the contract number and they will give you the contract price. There is a whole, it's like 3 pages of pricing at the end of that contract. And there's a link there to the contract at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions about the contract itself, you can contact Kim Klausing at the Division of Purchasing. So any entity can use this contract, not just state entities. Any governmental entity in Utah can use it. They can document, one of the services they offer is document restoration, and the contract expires in January 2026. So just as a final note, I would just say that we're in this together, you know, like this cool bridge that's built out of these trees. It's something where I think if we both kind of do what we can from our side, we are stronger together. So let us know if ever we can be of service to you. And I think we're pretty much at time, but if anyone has any questions, just let me know. We are making a recording of this and we'll post it on our website, and also I believe we email that to you when we send you a survey about it.
And the slides.
And the slides in that email as well. If you need a certificate, let us know. In general, we don't create those, but we can if you need some continuing education credits. So thanks, Adi and Dorothy. Thank you, and join us next Tuesday, same time, same place for our next room webinar. Thank you.